So Sanders continues. He says, when a man is concerned to be in rather than out, we may consider him to have a soteriological concern, even though he may have no view concerning an afterlife at all. And of course, we know that in Christian terminology, if you talk about salvation, primarily it's a discussion about where are you going to spend eternity. That's typically the discussion topic when we're talking about the focus. That is, when we bring up this idea of salvation in Christian circles, where will you spend eternity? Will you spend it with God, or will you spend it away from God? And so the focus on salvation attempts within church circles, the salvation message that's taught time and time again, is essentially an effort to bring sinners into a saving knowledge of Jesus so that they can spend eternity with God. And there's no mocking there. You're not hearing any mocking in my voice. That is a genuine concern. But in the Jewish worldview, to speak of soteriology, to speak of salvation, may not essentially, or even primarily, or even contain a view of the afterlife at all. There does appear, if we read through the rabbinic writings, there does appear to be, in rabbinic Judaism, Sanders goes on to say, a coherent and all-pervasive view of what constitutes the essence of Jewish religion and of how that religion works, and we shall occasionally, for the sake of convenience, call this view soteriology. In other words, the rabbis of the surviving, those who survived the destruction from the temple and created rabbinic Judaism in 200 CE, they talk about soteriology, they talk about salvation, and they do talk about works. And Sanders says, let's call this soteriology for a moment. But he goes on to conclude, the all-pervasive view can be summarized in the phrase covenantal nomism. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Covenantal nomism. Instead of just focusing on soteriology, the idea in Judaism of covenantal nomism captures both sides of the coin. How does one get in, and how does one stay in? How does one become a covenant member, and how does one remain a covenant member? Or to use Christian lingo, how does one become saved, and how does one stay saved or maintenance their salvation? How does one make sure that they're not forfeiting their salvation of some sort? So, covenantal nomism concerns itself with keeping the Torah for the express purpose of exercising the freedom of living as an existing covenant member, with the scriptural assurance that God was pleased with such nomistic service. That's essentially what covenantal nomism describes, provided, I add, that it was done in faith. See that? Covenantal nomism focuses on Torah observance within existing covenant membership. So covenantal nomism does not, per the Christian view, it does not leverage Torah obedience for the sake of becoming a covenant member. In Paul's day, the Jewish people believed they were covenant members by election. They believed that their ethnicity got them into the group. So don't think that they were trying to keep the Torah to be saved. I don't think that's a proper view of Torah. I think it's a stereotype postulated by the Christian church, and it's essentially carried down along to this day. It's maintained by most Christian communities that I have any familiarity with. They believe that Jews are trying to keep the Torah to be saved, and that's just not quite what covenantal nomism describes. Instead, I go on to say covenantal nomism did not view the Torah as a yoke of bondage, the way the historic Christian communities have done.